Caretaker is an interesting encounter because if you're going for a 1 floor, it is a difficult encounter to execute, but you don't typically lose much time on it. Instead, it will generally cause a full run reset if anything goes wrong. There's only really 2 variable segments in this encounter, symbol running and final stand, and both these segments typically only vary by a few seconds each. Certainly, an encounter with such high execution difficulty contrasted with very few simple segments is definitely a novel concept to raid speedrunning. Unlike Acquisition, Caretaker gives the team no buffer time to prepare for the encounter. The second the crystal is shot, Caretaker spawns, and symbols spawn inside the first floor symbol room. Since damage start is gated to the completion of the obelisk, the 1-2 skipper is the only person that can immediately go inside the symbol room to get the first 3 symbols. By the time the first runner is out, the other players are actually still getting joining allies, so the 1-2 checkpoint skipper can death warp at the start of the encounter to avoid joining allies, which makes them the second player to go in and get symbols. Finally, the tractor player should be the final runner, since the third person inside has almost no time to get stacks for a burst weapon requiring kills or hits, like Parasite or Grand Overture, since they are on a sword for movement until they come out. There are a few mechanics to be aware of during symbol running. First, 5 symbols at a time are present in the symbol room, with more respawning when the obelisk detects a player with knowledge near it. This means that the second runner should actually wait to go in, rather than going immediately, which will allow them to have a selection of 5 symbol locations to choose from rather than 2. This is important because it allows the second runner to influence where the last 3 symbols are, which will make things easier for the third runner, especially paired with good communication. Second, the first 3 symbols collected during Caretaker first floor will always be in a set 5 positions on the obelisk, namely the top left and mid 3 plates coming out of the room. This means that the first runner can pre-aim 2 of the sides coming out of the room, which is beneficial because no one is available to help them shoot their symbols thanks to joining allies. The second runner's symbol locations on the obelisk are also predetermined, but these are dependent on picking up respawn symbols versus the 2 that remain when the first runner comes out, so they're not reliable for a speedrunning environment, since the second runner will always opt to choose symbols that will make the third runner pathing easier, rather than choosing based on visible respawns. In our team strategy, I would focus on picking up left and mid symbols, which would allow the third runner to default to going right, where most if not all of the remaining symbols would be. Because of this, the second runner needs to communicate which symbols they are picking up to the first runner, who will help them get an instant input by shooting the 2 obelisk faces not immediately visible upon leaving the room. Box, scorn, light, box, scorn, light. All on your sides, box, scorn, light, box, scorn, light. Finally, the third runner does not need to memorize symbols, since there are only 3 that remain on the obelisk. There is one thing that the third runner should be aware of though. It is possible that if the third runner gets out very early, the obelisk does not detect their presence because they have entered its detection radius before it is done processing the previous input. For this reason, it is important that the second runner is fast with collecting and getting an accept, and that the third runner waits by the door until the obelisk is done processing the second input before approaching it. While symbols are being collected, Caretaker makes slow progress toward the obelisk. The stunners during this encounter are responsible for ensuring that Caretaker is positioned correctly for damage. Depending on the number of stuns and how Caretaker is stunned, Caretaker can end up too far down the ramp, making damage less reliable given that the tractor player has to move further to do damage, or he can end up too close to the plate, which can block players from shooting missiles. If you don't stun at all, Caretaker will start damage by the obelisk, meaning he won't move, but your splash damage weapons and abilities will kill all of the adds you are using for buffs, especially for Verity's Brow. This is one of the reasons this encounter relies on a lot of player consistency. Any variance in symbol runtime can result in unfavorable damage circumstances. As a result, it is important to know how to stun Caretaker. If you allow Caretaker to stomp and get back up before shooting his face, his stun lasts longer. Knowing this, you can control where Caretaker ends up by varying the types of stuns you perform, assuming consistent symbols. Caretaker is immediately stunnable when the stunners arrive, since joining allies delays player spawns to the point where they will arrive after he has started moving. This means that the first stun will always be a stomp stun. I would recommend that most teams start with either 2 stomp stuns or 1 stomp stun and 1 quick stun. Eventually, once your symbols are fast enough, you can just do 1 stomp stun, but prepare to communicate a second stun if your symbols are slow because of bad RNG or movement mistakes. Finally, sometimes Caretaker's missiles will all choose to suddenly target a random player after stunning, so be on your toes right after every stun. And now for the fun part. Once all 3 runners have finished their inputs, damage will start 15 seconds after the ritual completes. During this time, players should make any swaps and get any stacks for short buff timers while others shoot missiles. In order to one floor Caretaker, players need to do his entire non-final health bar, around 20 million health, ideally on one plate. This is easily the hardest damage check in non-master Destiny 2 rating, and yet, Vow of the Disciple is probably the most perfect environment for it to be possible. Since Caretaker leaves 5 seconds after you pass his health bar threshold, players have the opportunity to begin stacking up gradual damage sources until the threshold, and then pump burst damage sources into him once the threshold is reached. Although there is currently no consistent Caretaker one-floor strategy after the numerous nerfs to storm grenades as well as Heart of Inmost Light, in the future it will remain absolutely essential that there is some sort of background tick damage source on top of a burst damage component in order to reach the ridiculously high damage requirement to one floor. Thanks to Into the Light mods, Vow is the perfect environment to be able to stack certain grenades, like Storm and Pulse grenades, by combining grenade regeneration buffs from exotics like Verity's Brow. For the burst component, typically Parasite and Grand Overture are used, but supers like Blade Barrage and Thunder Crash are up for consideration depending on the type of damage strategy used. There are a few things to be aware of when planning out Caretaker damage on top of the fundamentals already mentioned. First, damage numbers are artificially inflated for players that do damage before the threshold is reached, meaning that one player may be doing more true damage to Caretaker despite having a lower number than another player on the wipe screen. On top of this, Destiny 2 already struggles heavily with accurately displaying damage numbers when an aggressive damage strategy with many entities is used. In the 1731 floor, there were probably around 25 grenades on Caretaker as he crossed his threshold, so this is no doubt an example of an environment where Destiny 2's damage display would struggle to keep up with the sheer quantity of damage ticks going off. Second, the Ruinous Resonance buff that allows you to damage Caretaker lingers when you get off of the plate for a second, meaning you can back up off the plate if Caretaker is very close so you don't die to a rocket or so you can see missiles that are above him. Finally, after damage starts, none of the new missiles coming out of Caretaker's back will become homing missiles that splash the team with pervading darkness, so everyone can commit to damage provided that every missile that was created before damage started is taken care of. If you want more information on Caretaker specifically, I have a video that goes more in detail on my channel called How to One Floor Caretaker Consistently, but this video covers the most important details. After successfully one-flooring Caretaker, both sets of stairs should drop instantly, allowing players to climb up to final stand. Normally, this is a slow process, so it is recommended that Titans save their Thunder Crash, as it is typically damage loss on Caretaker, for getting up to final stand faster, while Warlocks switch to a sword to assist them in ascending more quickly. Since there are no adds available to get Death Throw stacks, Warlocks can also switch to Starfire, while the Titans throw grenades and use either a linear, sniper, or rocket to finish Caretaker off. The Tractor players should also switch to Divinity, and any players with no ammo should make an effort to shoot missiles so that Pervading Darkness doesn't cut grenade damage, especially for the Warlock fusions. After this, everyone should change characters so that the 1-3 player's door at the end of Jumping Puzzle opens with no delay, and regroup in orbit for the rejoin. And that's how you kill Caretaker. When a runnable one-floor strategy is discovered, I'll be sure to post about it on this channel, but two-flooring is pretty much the same thing, except the second floor symbol room is a bit more punishing with its spawn RNG. Caretaker is a deceptively simple encounter, so hopefully this video did a good job of explaining how all of its mechanics interact when it comes to damage. Next video, we have Exhibition to explore, which might just be my favorite encounter to speedrun in all of Destiny 2. See you there.